Hi, Kelsey here. I can't wait to take a little bit of time right now to explain a different concept that actually originates from systems thinking. And systems thinking is sort of a discipline that I've taken upon myself to study several times in the past years because it has so much impact, so much relevance to not just business, but actually personal matters in life, habits, biological systems. It has everything to do with the way that systems function and process and tend to work with each other even as well. And this is one sort of analytical tool that we are capable of using that actually has a synthetic effect. So without going too much into that, I would simply like to present the problem to you when it comes to our business strategies, as many of us are currently involved in them. Now, if you already work like a full-time job and you love your work so much that you can't imagine, you don't have anything else that you would necessarily look forward to, which has not been the case typically for people that I know, but that may be the case for you. This may not matter very much to you. But if you, for instance, do a certain job because you're trying to make money, so with this dream that the business you would actually like to be doing, the sort of service you'd like to be providing people, isn't coming about, but you really want it to, this is what you would really like to do, it's your passion, it's your lifeblood, then this is more likely a typical problem for you and probably one of the most critical problems in how it can affect us in the long term. So first of all, let me introduce this concept, which is the 40-40-40, because this is what typically most of us are doing right now when it comes to full-time work. The 40-40-40 principle essentially refers to what we can expect from our full-time work, full-time effort, trying to manage and build an income. In today's economy, in today's current society, this is the way it tends to go. It tends to go that you work for 40 hours a week, and you will likely work for 40 years before you reach retirement. And even once you do reach retirement, that you will only actually accumulate 40% of the income that you made throughout those 40 years that will actually apply to your retirement funds. And chances are that's not going to be big enough. In fact, recently I was reading how 50,000 is a common figure to expect. So if you're retiring at 60 and, God forbid you live for 40 more years, but let's say you were, likely to had a life expectancy of 80 years old, that's 40 years you have to live off of $50,000. That is not very much, and you're certainly not getting any of the dream house maybe you wanted, or that little cottage out in the countryside, or anything like that. All those options are probably not as available to you at 50,000. So rather, let's look at what part of the problem ends up being around this, because we don't have to work our lives this way, even if that's the norm. There's a fun little saying out there right now too in a lot of the new business world, especially in network marketing, that says job, J-O-B. J-O-B actually stands as an acronym for just over broke. Just over broke. And there's something very, very real about that, especially now as I introduce the cycle to you of why that tends to be the case. So let's say we have low income. And we can also just say we don't have a lot of money, but our income's low in any case. We don't have very much resources. We have low financial resources. So here's what typically happens, and I am as much a victim is the wrong word, I'm as much a proponent of this in my own life, unknowingly, as many people are. But this is what tends to happen. We go into some sort of a job to try and rectify this. So we'll call this the job. I'm going to capitalize it, because remember our acronym now. This is our job, all right? And it's probably full-time. It may just be part-time. Quite honestly, it doesn't always make as huge a difference which it is, because if we're not enjoying the job, if it's not our dream job, then it's not going to be all that good for us in the end. So we do that, and we're addressing the problem of low income. We're addressing it. The more we work, the less the low income state which means that actually your income rises a little bit. A little bit. The problem, of course, is that we don't typically make enough from our jobs by current economic standards in order to actually sufficiently not just pay the bills every month, but accumulate enough to really gain a steady amount of profit, put some in savings, etc., without going into that 40-40-40 mode. And by the end of that, 50,000, coming away with 50,000 is not necessarily going to be your most awesome retirement plan. So keep that in mind. What it is, though, that when we're continuing to choose this strategy, relying on this, doing our job, whatever that might be, as the way that we're going to eventually have all the time in the world to do the thing we want, this becomes a negative factor, a deficient factor toward accumulating that actual wealth and increasing the abundance of your finances. What it does is this other option, which would be, we'll say if this is your short term, by the way, ST for short term. In this particular case, what a job is going to look like is you put in a certain number of hours, you get paid that number of hours. It is a regular standard income plan. In the case where you have a long term, so let's say it's, I'm going to put down, for instance, what I do, which is through the Young Living organization, the Central Oils company. This is, let's see, what should we just call it? We'll just call it our long-term, for lack of a better word. It is our long-term strategy. And the more we are focused on this short-term strategy, this, unfortunately, also suffers as well. Because in a long-term strategy, you're looking for a different kind of plan. Your standard dollar per hour income plan doesn't suffice by current economic standards. So rather, something in your long term is going to be like residual income, or some type of compounding. You want something other than your regular dollar per hour standard income plan for your long term, because this increases, though more slowly than this one, this increases over time and with persistent effort, steadily, and eventually will manifest much, much, much more in a shorter period of time than 40 years, for sure. Try taking it down to 4 years versus the short term that will take much, much longer. But the longer that we continue investing solely in our short term, what we are essentially doing is there's this misperception that we're actually changing our state. So we're, again, just over broke. Or let's call that instead, because it seems like a beneficial thing, we'll just call it getting by. We may be saving slowly for retirement or for eventually doing our dream job, but it's not going to be very quickly, unless you're already a millionaire and have a great inheritance. So we're just getting by. And what this does is, this actually negates the effectiveness of your long-term strategy. Why? Because, of course, you're taking much less time and energy is being invested in this. And over time, you're losing time. Time is a non-renewable resource. Energy is renewable. I can recover from a really stressful day and have the same amount, if not more, energy the next day. Time is non-renewable. So when it comes to time, we've lost some of our non-renewable resource for building this long-term strategy. So the more that we're invested in the job, the more we're also depreciating some of our long-term strategy. Now, here's the problem. Of course we're going to continue to do the job, because our short-term provides immediate income, the long-term doesn't. A residual income plan, typically, you're lucky if you break even the first month, and then from there you're still only making a couple of hundred per month, even though that's really quickly increasing by the compounding effect, even though that's quickly increasing over time. The immediate bills that come up, the immediate circumstances seem to say a job is more predictable, a job is better security, etc., etc. So how do we get by this? Well, I think it's pretty obvious. In the same way that an addict needs to kick a habit, and cold turkey tends to be the most disastrous and damaging way. If you've ever gone cold turkey on an addiction, by the way, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Going cold turkey can be the most damaging psychologically, physically to yourself. And it may be the way you decide to go if you've already damaged yourself far enough, but there are better ways for sure, which is weaning off of the current addiction, weaning off of the habit, and moving into a habit that's going to be life-serving. So in this particular case, we'll want both a short-term and a long-term. If we have both a short-term and a long-term that we're putting some energy into, then we can effectively start to wean ourselves off the short-term strategy. So what might that look like? That might look like in an average day, let's say, 5 days a week. This is just as an example. We'll say 5, why not, 5 days a week. And we're going to put in, say, 5 days a week we put in 8 hours. Right? Okay, so 5 days a week, 8 hours, of course. We're putting in 40 hours a week. What we want to do for our long-term strategy in order to start to increase the benefits is we want to put in at least 2 to 3 hours every day. So let's say 2 hours is pretty good, and 1 to 2 hours isn't bad. But let's just say ideally you're able to put in every day 2 hours. That comes to just 14 hours a week. All right? Now, if this is a short-term job, a part-time job, this will make it a lot easier, but we'll get to that in a second. For your long-term strategy, whether it's residual income, some kind of compounding, these 14 hours a week are going to definitely, if they're consistent, that is, you don't take breaks from it, you consistently every day put in about 1 to 2 hours a week into your long-term strategy, you can effectively move out over time from the short-term. The short-term hours you can start decreasing them right away. And you can start increasing your long-term hours until you're doing it all the time. That is your dream, the thing that makes you really happy all the time. Now, we don't always have a means to residual income when it comes to our dream job. For me, for instance, for coaching, that's not a very high prospect. For coaching, I get paid not dollar per hour, but not quite residual income. For instance, I would charge, $100-something per session in a month. And that session may only require, both in its preparation and everything else, about 2 hours. But, that said, those 2 hours, from those 2 hours, I'm making 100 and something, a session. So that's pretty good when you consider dollar per hour. But we're not going to think that way. We're going to think about this is what we put our life energy into, this is what we want to do all the time. It's not a residual income, though. So it's really important that we find something that actually helps us structure a sort of residual or compounding plan around our lives, so that the service we really want to provide, we can provide without any barriers. So for instance, one day it'll be possible for me to coach. Thanks to this long-term plan and the residual income that I'll get from it, it'll be possible for me to coach without having to charge so much. Or actually having to charge at all if that's what I choose to do, if I actually decide to invest completely in the long-term plan and it turns out to be my dream job, which so far that's been true, I won't have to even in charge for anything. Or better yet, here's a better reason to do it if it's not about the money. It will enable you to do your service and serve life without the pressure of paying the bills. In other words, if I'm thinking, oh my goodness, I need 5 more clients. I have to have 5 more clients because according to my calculator, that's how many I'm going to need to pay the bills this month. That gets eradicated the moment that I'm able to offer my services without the stipulation of having a certain number of people in order to make a certain amount each month to pay the bills. What if you were free to just give your service or get paid for your service even without the worry about whether or not it was enough for your bills? So this is about all I'm going to say about this, and I know there's a lot of complicated factors in here, and I would love to hear any questions or comments around it, but definitely sit with this because Many of us will only invest in the short-term strategies. Some of us get really scared about the potential long-term strategies out there, but everyone from Warren Buffett and the like would recommend for sure. You might notice that they're involved in long-term strategies that many of us have completely looked the other way from, simply because the media doesn't tend to portray them very well. All right, I hope this was very helpful, and I can't wait to talk to you again soon.